Well, Erika, can you just talk to us a little bit about how recruitment is going virtually for your office in International Affairs?
So like I said, I was supposed to be in South Korea, and actually the 2 weeks before that, I was supposed to be in Vietnam. So we've kind of targeted the areas that we were supposed to be in this spring. Since we're not there in person, we've either done Zoom, we've done like social media campaigns, emails out. That's kind of what we've been doing, trying to keep in contact with the students who are already accepted, who are coming in for fall, because there's so much like uncertainty over everything. Because even though the university's plan is right now to go back to in-person classes, students who don't have a visa can't come. Mm-hmm. And the embassies and consulates aren't open to issue visas right now. So we have all these students that are accepted, but they're like, we can't do anything. We're stuck. So sure. That was another part of our stuff this morning. Was we had questions of, are we going to be on campus in the fall, and how do we get there because we don't have a visa? So
yeah. Tricky questions to answer right now, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're completely dependent on the Department of State reopening embassies and consulates, and it's just a waiting game. So I know our student workers we've had to switch over to processing all of our documents electronically, and that's normally not allowed. The government has allowed us to do that because of the situation, and shipping methods weren't available and all of that. And so we've had to do that. And the students that are doing it, they're like, if they don't get to come and we've done all this work, we're going to be so mad.
I bet.
So, yeah. Yeah. So
what about our students that are here right now? What are you hearing from them? How can we be helpful to them in career services and so forth?
So the students who are here right now, quite a few of them actually went home right when everything kind of started, right after spring break. Students who could get flights to their home countries went, because they didn't know what was going to happen, didn't know if they'd be able to stay on campus. And of course, everyone, it's like, okay, I want to be home with my family in a time like this. I don't want to be stuck somewhere else. And so the majority of our students did go home. There were some countries that by the time the university switched to online, the borders were closed or all flights were canceled, so those students are still here. That's mainly why students are still living on campus, is because they had nowhere else to go. They couldn't go home, didn't have friends or family in the US, so they're on campus right now at Forest Village. So some of those things, I know we had some students sign up to stay on campus, and then they had friends that were like, hey, just come stay with us, rather than staying on campus. So that's been really nice to see, some just people being like, okay, you're coming with us, you're not gonna stay. Like, yeah. Otherwise you're staying in a dorm room and there's no one else there. And so that's been really good. And our students are like, can you believe they just invited us to come stay for who knows how long? And so they're like, we're trying to do what we can. So, but we've been, through the International Student Organization, they've continued to have their meetings virtually, and I'm the advisor, so I Zoom in on those meetings, and it's been really good to hear from students all around the world now, because some are at home and some are on campus and some are in other states, and it's like, okay, so how is this quarantine going for you in different countries and different situations? So that's kind of interesting to to hear how different countries are dealing with it. We've even had some former students and alumni who have Zoomed in because it's online and it's like 8 o'clock in the evening where they're at, and they're like, we're done working for the day, so they'll Zoom in and we get to hear what they're doing and catch up with them a little bit. So.
All right, Erica, so question for you. We've had a lot of international students who are graduating, who are still in the US, worried about finding a job afterward. So what is the, what do you tell them? What career advice do you give them about CPT, OPT, all the things that we kind of know enough about to be dangerous?
So as far as CPT, that can only be used while they're still in their degree program. So students who are graduating in the spring, it's not an option for them at this point. If they are graduating with a summer date or in the fall, they could do CPT over the summer. During the summer, they can work up to 40 hours a week since summer isn't a required semester to take classes. So I know a lot of our students who do CPT, it's usually in the summer. But as far as OPT, most of the students who are graduating in the spring have already applied for OPT, and we've actually received a good number of those OPT cards that they need for their work authorization. I know last spring, the processing timeline was rather long. This spring, it's been about 60 days. So that's been very good. Citizenship and Immigration went ahead and hired more adjudicators. So that helped with bringing the timeline down a little bit. So we've seen good traction on that end of things. The issue that we've seen this year is companies not hiring or maybe just putting a hold on it. They've said, here's your job offer letter, and then they've postponed start dates, things like that. So that's kind of our end of things has gone better. And then the other end, it's usually the easier, the more stable side of things it's flip-flopped. So just telling the students, of course, they can't start working until their start date that they chose for OPT. And some of them are like, well, can I change that start date to later to maybe give myself a little more time? The only problem is once you submit that start date, we can't change it. So they do have 90 days of unemployment for that year of OPT. So watching those unemployment days is going to be a little more prevalent this go around than it has been in the past, because at least so far, we've not received any guidance for any extensions of that in light of COVID-19. It's all still the same. So we're advising students to really watch that, because once you go over that 90 days of unemployment, your status is no longer active. You do have to leave the country. So that's something we're really watching right now too.
Sure. Yeah, we've definitely seen that lockdown in positions posting and so forth, but we're seeing a little bit more movement there. But where can our office be most helpful in that process, from your opinion?
I think career services, you guys have been really great with just advising international students. I know when students come into our office and they start the OPT process and they're like, where do I go to find a job? And I'm like, go talk to career services. I'm like, do you have a resume? And most do, because they've had to work on them in class, or they've had to ask them for some tips on it, maybe kind of updating it. if you did work on it maybe a year ago in class, and maybe you have some more skills, more experience. So that's been really helpful. I know when students come in and they're like, can you help with this? I'm like, I could, but I'm going to send you to the experts. So I'm like, yeah, I haven't even worked on my resume lately. So there's probably new things that my resume is not any good anymore either. So so sending them to you guys has been really great. And I know like the connections at the career fair, our office always goes for the OPT, CPT side of things, but seeing all the companies, I know there's a few that when I walk through, I notice, I'm like, okay, we have students that work there. We have students that work there just from processing applications and things. So, and seeing some of the alumni that work at those companies, and then of course they send them to the career fair because they have connections on campus. That's been really good too.
I've seen a shift. A lot of organizations are maybe offering virtual internships in place of in-person internships because of the COVID-19 situation. Is there anything international students need to be worried about with that or aware of when it comes to CPT and virtual internships?
So that's another area where the government has been more lenient than they normally would be. They are allowing CPT to even be remote. So it's very new, but they are being more lenient and allowing those things. I know we had talked about the virtual internships even overseas and how that works, and but they have been lenient and are going to allow that for CPT as well as normal OPT.
That's great. What are you hearing from students? Are they taking advantage of that, or have you seen any of that paperwork come through?
I've seen a few more CPT applications than we usually get than we've gotten in the past. CPT, I know at other schools from going to conferences, there's a lot of schools that are like, that's all we do for like this certain amount of time. And I'm like, ours is usually around 10 a year. And we've gotten a lot more the last few years. So that's becoming more of a focus. I think students are a little more clear on what's required, and the focus on profession-based learning has brought the internships more to a focus for students. I know we've had students in like criminal justice. I had a couple of those this last semester do internships, and so it's been interesting to see what internships come up too with different companies, and yeah.
So I had a specific question from a student who's going to be graduating, international student, who is an elementary education major. So talk to me about like what steps or what limitations there are if you're an education major. Can they substitute teach? What's the rules on that, I guess?
So that's actually a brand new area for me. I've honestly never worked with a student in elementary education. I have worked with a student in like school guidance counseling before, but as far as actually teaching, this is my first one. So that's something that I actually have to look into the regulations for, because student teaching or substitute teaching, things like that, that's all brand new to me. So I'm very lucky to have, we actually have access to an advisor manual through our organization for international educators. And it pretty much takes the federal immigration regulations and puts them in normal people talk rather than government lingo. So That's
So we're
something that
reading the
I
manual
use
on this one.
pretty frequently for those questions. Yeah, I'm like, okay, I can look through the manual for education stuff. So yeah, that's what I would have to go do, because I just haven't had that situation come up before.
I'm glad that was your answer, Erica, because we all had the same puzzlement earlier.
Yes. So the student that you were talking about,
Yeah,
that was
I haven't had that.
the student that you talked about earlier, that was the school counseling, the international student. I think I'm familiar with the young lady that you were talking about. How did that work out for her? Was she able to find work in her industry here?
Yeah, I actually talked to her on Friday. She emailed me and was like, do you have time to talk? And I was like, yeah. So we set up a time. She's actually a guidance counselor at a school in Alaska.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So like the last time I had to send her an I-20, I got her address and I was like, FedEx doesn't send to where you live. So I'm like, where exactly do you live in Alaska? And so I looked at her, I actually pulled it up on like Google Maps to see where it was. And I'm like, can you see Russia from your house? Because it's that far north. So she's like, yeah, she's like, we only get our mail like a couple days a week and it comes in by plane. I'm like, okay, this, so it's very interesting. And when I talked to her on the phone, I was like, so how do you like it there? And she's like, actually, I love it. She's like,
Good.
it's so different from what she grew up with. She's from Mumbai, India. Like going from this huge city in India to this little, literally village in Alaska. I'm like, I never would have thought she would have liked it, but she loves it there. And she has she actually has a contract to work again for the next school year.
Oh, good.
So
Great.
she's getting all the paperwork set up for that. And I'm like, great. So yeah.
Excellent.
You just never know where they're going to end up.
Yeah. I was shocked. I was like, you're where? But worked out for her.
So Erica, are there other things that, or closing tips that you have for international students or for our office on how we, best serve our students and our employers during this time until things, shake back to whatever normal looks like?
I think for students, just take a breath. I know a lot of this is scary and they keep saying it's like unprecedented. Like we've never dealt with this before. Nobody really has all the answers. So, I mean, I know in our field, things change. It seems like every other day there's regulations that were always in place that they've become a little more lenient on, and you can do this now instead of having to hold strict to what we were used to. And I'm sure a lot of industries are like that. So just in searching for jobs, I know a lot of companies that I have heard of that are hiring are doing interviews through Zoom or Skype or however they can, and maybe the employees are starting out working remotely. I actually did hear of a colleague in international education who was changing jobs in the middle of all this, and she's like, I haven't even met my coworkers other than on Zoom. She's like, I've worked there for over a month and I haven't met them in person yet. So this is all completely new for everybody. And I mean, I think if anything, it's a good resume builder. Dealing with adversity and having to adapt and just having those skills will be good, yes, to bring something positive out of this.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, and we sure appreciate you answering our never-ending series of questions that we certainly send to you all the time, because just like you send the resume questions our direction, you can bet we send a whole lot of people your direction as well. So, and we sure appreciate everything that
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Any closing questions, Hannah, Travis, Lori?
I don't think so.
No, thank
Yeah,
you,
okay.
Erika. We really appreciate you.
Yes, definitely.
Yep, thanks.
Well,
Yeah,
thanks.
you guys do a great job too, so.
We all make a good team. Well, thanks so much for tuning in today, Erika. We appreciate it.